Roi Ravhon, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Thank you, Alex, for having me here.
Awesome. So you are the CEO and co-founder of Finout. Can you tell us a little bit about what Finout does?
Finout helps organization manage and reduce their cloud spend across both the cloud providers, but also the other super expensive solutions like Datadog and Snowflake and Databricks, and aggregate it all into one place, allocate the cost, optimize it, and even get all the way to the cost per customer for each of our tenants.
Awesome. I'm excited to dig into some of that stuff. And I know this has been like a much bigger issue for people right now with some of the, economy winds changing and things like that. Can you maybe just tell me, based on what your experience, what is so hard about monitoring cloud spend, sorry.
Yeah. First we have the fragmentation issue, right? Most modern companies are already multi-cloud. Multi-cloud is the current basics. But it's oftentimes like a lot more complicated because we have just vendors that are doing a better job than the cloud providers in most of their specific ways of expertise. So Snowflake is a better data warehouse than Athena, right? So we start to see more and more companies start to use magnitude multiple vendors, and this starts to create a real fragmentation issue when cost management. So understanding how much we're spending on AWS, it's commodity already, but understanding how much we're spending across our entire user base spend is hard, and especially when talking about Kubernetes, when things starts to abstract and change because AWS is charging us by the instance, but we're actually running pods. So how the hell do we running that translation? And on top of the entire services that we have, it starts to get to be a real complicated problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you all have some new tools out for monitoring Kubernetes spend. I want to get into those in a sec, but like one thing I want to know is like, how are the provider tools in this area to like investigate your costs? Are those any good, or like what's the state of those? From what either AWS or GCP or something like that gives you.
So I think the cloud providers have drastically improved in the past couple of years. But there are always the incentive kind of question floating around, right? So is AWS incentivized to give you the best cost management tool in order to reduce their spend? That's questionable, right? And they obviously don't have any incentivized to help you manage multi-cloud because they want you to have everything. So if you're using two different clouds, so you need to use two different tools, and each of those tools has its own terminology, its own limitations and way of visualizing stuff, and you need to start to manage those. And if you get to providers that are not as cost modern, like a Datadog that has literally zero availability into how much you're spending on them, other than the monthly invoice, then things start to get more complicated because you don't even have a tool with some of the cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the customers that come to you, are they looking to use you because they actually want to save money? They actually say, hey, I want to cut our bill by X% at some time. Or is it more about predictability for the finance team and understanding what their expenses are? Or what's the main sort of use case they're looking for there?
So what we oftentimes see in the market is, FinOps is a journey. And, when companies starts to implement FinOps, the same as, they started to implement DevOps a few years back. So they're starting just by, let's visualize what the hell is happening. Let's just start to get aware. And then let's start to budget it. Let's start to focus it. Let's start to optimize, the low-hanging fruit. So let's have better commitments with the vendor. Let's find and right-size, underutilized instances and those kind of stuff. But then it starts to get more complicated and start to get into the more advanced use cases. So like now, how can we really understand what the cost implication of every new change that we do in our environment? What's the attribution for each customer? Maybe we have a use case that is more profitable, less profitable. What's the new pricing scheme that we can start to build? And it's all start like really based on those metrics, because infrastructure expense is usually the biggest ones in the company COGS, right? So when companies selling a product, most of the money that they get are going towards the infrastructure in order to host it. And like every dollar there, every accountability, every percent on the margin can have drastic results on companies' performance. And I think especially in 2023, like this is what we learned as an industry is that profitability matters. And we always wanted to like push it further down the line, and we'll deal with it someday. But that day has come, and now we need to to run faster operations in order to maintain and regain control over our spend.
Yep, absolutely. Do you see a pretty big gap between sort of the best in class folks at this stuff and sort of the laggards in terms of how well they understand their costs? And you're talking about narrowing it down to customers or to features or things like that. Are there companies that have a pretty good idea of like, hey, this is how much this transaction costs, or even this sort of feature is going to cost me?
Yeah, so 100%. It's all a matter of maturity. The time the company is at the market, their level of adoption of cloud, and when they started investing on FinOps. So our more mature customers have really good understanding of gross margin for each individual customer, together with all of its attributes, like which sales rep is closing at which margins, which territory is better, which quarter is better. Like they start to really analyze into that and build better pricing. So this is the advanced stuff. And we still have customers that just figure out that cloud is expensive, and they're like, all right, so we migrated from on-prem to cloud, and AWS sold us that it's going to be amazing, but now we start to get bills that we have no idea, no justification why it's happening, and we need to start to drill down into that and like start with the low-hanging fruit, start with the allocation, and then advance all the way to that cost per customer dream. So it really depends on where the company is on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to flip a little bit to the Kubernetes stuff. So you all just released some new Kubernetes cost monitoring stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about that solution? Then I want to go into the specific problems around Kubernetes and cost.
Yeah, so Kubernetes is I always say a blessing and a curse, right? So Kubernetes gives us the ability to run stuff at scale and to not think about placements and the distribution and the recovery and deployment. Like everything is amazing at that front. But on the other hand, it's very tough to manage and troubleshoot, but it's also very tough to predict cost and to really allocate stuff. So basically, our tools that I know that we had before, if we were running with the native cloud provider tooling, it's breaking when it comes to Kubernetes. So Kubernetes does not have the ability to break it down, and suddenly we need to report cost in a different language than what the cloud provider is actually charging us. So now we have like a misalignment of technology. So AWS talks in instances, but we are like a level up, and we need to do that translation. So Kubernetes was always supported in Finout since almost day one. But what's released today called Kubernetes Cost Governance. And Kubernetes Cost Governance is the ability to use Kubernetes cost if it's one of the other line items within AWS. So we can use Kubernetes within Finout cost allocation, to start to break down costs per team, for example. So we can take a Kubernetes namespace, everything with that specific label, and combine it with specific instances or RDSs or Snowflake query tags or whatever to a specific team. Then we can budget on those elements that includes all of the infrastructure and Kubernetes. We can forecast based on that. We can find anomalies on Kubernetes as well as the other cloud providers. And we can even create a Kubernetes cost optimization effort. So we can help companies right-size their pods, which is usually like a big nightmare. We can discuss more about this later. But, developers had the tendency to just, ask a huge amount of resources without any justification on why it's actually needed. So we can help companies, track when it's happening in order to optimize their requests, to later optimize their clusters and so forth. So we brought Kubernetes into every single of FinOps feature. Every single of FinOps features to have like a full cost governance suite for Kubernetes.
Gotcha. Okay. And remind me on Kubernetes terminology. In instances is a pod. Is that roughly right? And then what's a container? Or how's that work? What's sort of like a cloud instance, and what's a service running or a container running on that instance?
So Kubernetes nodes are usually translated directly to the instances from the provider. Okay. So we're looking at the cluster as kind of a cloud of resources, which is abstracted. And when it comes to Kubernetes, terminology, we're using containers as part of pods, and pods are like the smallest unit within a Kubernetes. It can be one of more containers running within that pod that share, resources and are running in the same host. And then pods can be aggregated into like more advanced kind of resources. So we can run deployments or stateful sets or jobs, and like each one has its own specific kind of usage. But this is where it starts to get like really hard, and resources such as deployment can live and associated in specific namespaces and with specific tags. So now we're asking like what the tag or label in Kubernetes cost, and that label is, well, we need to see all the usage of all the containers within those specific hosts that they ran on, take the proportional cost of the pod, allocate it to the containers, and then start to sum up the containers into the pod, into the deployment, into the labels that was assigned to it, and report it back across all three clouds. So this starts to get like more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you able to break down, the nodes themselves? They sort of map to instances. Are you able to break down things like network traffic, or is that more of a black box where it's like, hey, you just have to spread it across the different services?
Yeah, so we can allocate the network cost directly into the pod as well. So, when we look at the cost of an instance, it's usually around memory, CPU, and network, right? This is our three bottlenecks. Disks are like easy because they're attachable from the outside, but when looking like that, this is the host capability and what it can do. So we need to allocate all three, to see what's the capabilities of the host, and then allocate the proportional cost of the CPU, proportional cost of the memory, proportional cost of the network that was utilized by each pod. So again, a nightmare, but this is part of the Kubernetes kind of way of operation. And by doing that, we need to tweak the specifics, for each deployment. So maybe there's a deployment that is more memory intensive or CPU intensive, right? So we need to change the dial between how do we allocate the importance of each of the metrics into the pod, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so your Kubernetes monitoring, it's an agentless system. Am I understanding that correctly? And can you tell me about how are you gathering that sort of information using an agentless system?
So when we started to build Finout, it was very important to us to make everything as frictionless as possible. And as a former DevOps leader, the single worst thing you can tell me to do is install an agent on my Kubernetes clusters. So we wanted to remove that friction and say all right, most companies already have something that monitors their Kubernetes, right? You can't run it blindly. So maybe we can use those solutions that are already monitoring the environment and take the metrics that we need out of that. So we picked two very common solutions, one being Datadog and the other being Prometheus, which Prometheus is the go-to Kubernetes monitoring, just one Helm chart that you can install. So we can connect to Prometheus or Datadog, fetch all the metrics that we need. So it's very easy for companies to start to work with us because they don't need to install it, they don't need to trust us. They need just to export the metrics that we need for calculating the cost. And we have everything we need within those. So we have which host it was running on, which memory, CPU, and network usage it had, and then we can allocate the cost based on the actual cost that we had across everything. This is gives us the ability to run Finout also with different pricing models than the rest, because we don't really care about clusters. We don't care about the amount of nodes. We don't care about anything. We just care about the resources that we're managing. So Finout is a limited cluster kind of solution, and we have the ability to do more advanced stuff with more better cost efficiency, solutions.
Yeah, it's nice when you don't have to have a pricing model that sort of fights your customers, right? And they're trying to avoid having all these clusters and things like that, just to avoid having to pay more to some third party. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think it's the worst thing you can do, to change your architecture in order to cheat a specific vendor and pricing model. So you pay per cluster, you have one cluster free, but you're charging on a limited cluster. So people are going to start to hack, the system, start to open multiple installations just to hack your pricing model. It's you're preventing value, and we don't believe in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you run on, different cloud providers and all that thing. A lot of them have different Kubernetes service implementations. Are they do they play nice together with your stuff, or did you have to do a lot of custom stuff for each cloud to make them work? Or are they all conforming to sort of a general Kubernetes thing?
So, If we think about that problem, of Kubernetes cost management, is just a private case of a bigger problem of vendors are like, miscommunicating the metrics that we see fit. So think of S3 buckets and folders and RDS and tables, and even like Snowflake charge you by by storage and by credits, but you're actually running queries in warehouses. So this pattern of like obscuring the actual cost you care about is constantly happening within those vendors. So what we did is like developing a general solution in order to break down any type of cost with any type of third-party metric with whatever weights we have. So our solution, for Kubernetes is just a private case of that of that abstraction. So we don't really care about if you're using EKS, as a managed Kubernetes, or AKS or GKE, or installing your own cluster, which really no one does anymore, but it's still an option, because we treat the Kubernetes resource pool as cost, and we treat the pods as one metric that we can derive, and then we can allocate the cost based on anything. So it really doesn't matter if it's managed or not managed. We just solve the problem, like the general problem, and then we can allocate it to all the solutions that are there.
Yeah. How delayed is cost data? Is it, up to the minute or hour, or is it maybe a day or two behind? What's that look like?
So it really depends on the vendor. So with AWS being the most prominent example, it's usually between 24 and 48 hours. And even then they can, they're back fixing, everything. So it is what it is usually. So when looking at AWS cost management, the standard is around 48 hours in delay before we are, we know that AWS stops messing around with the whole data that we're working at. But with solutions that are, we're extrapolating costs and we're doing our sorts of calculation and not, are relying on them like closing a bill. So it can be, matter of like less day and it's always live. So solutions like Datadog and stuff like we close every day and just publishes the results. So really depends on the specific vendors, but it's not a real time kind of thing at all. If it's real time, it means that you're guessing on what the cost will be, because cost is like very, very dependent on a specific instance and like commitment plans and EDP discounts and spots or not spots or those kinds of terminologies. So it can like change drastically, like tens of percent. If you don't want to guess, you just have to wait to get your actual data from AWS.
Absolutely. Do you think we'll see sort of, I don't know if you call it like the free tier problem or like the accidental bill problem, but basically like, someone is trying to learn and then accidentally spins up, has like $1,000 bill, Do you think we'll see cloud providers actually take that on, or is it so difficult with sort of this billing delay that you're mentioning? And maybe it's probably small enough potatoes for them that they're just like, why work on that? Do you think we'll see progress in that area?
I think we have seen like AWS starts to give a better tooling, like Cost Explorer is not as horrible that it was before. So you can create budgets and you can create alerts, and you're getting cost recommendations, from AWS. So I think AWS is aware that they are starting to be a problem. And when AWS cares about their customers and want to like reduce churn, they need to make sure that everyone is still well incentivized to continue to operate in AWS. So if they're gonna just let you do whatever you want, you're gonna figure out one day that you're just overspending and you move to one of the competitors. So AWS has that incentive in order to make but it's always like a fine balance between running you as efficient as possible, but not like spending on stuff that you're going to knock on the door and ask for a refund.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you hear a lot of those complaints like on Reddit or Twitter or things like that, people running up those bills, but it hopefully, I guess it's not as common as it seems and things like that. One thing I want to ask you about, just like with billing, we've seen over the last couple of years, a movement towards a lot more pay-per-use type stuff. We have Lambda, we have Snowflake that you mentioned, and things like that. How has that changed billing, planning for billing, unpredictability around that?
So essentially, I like to think of the problem as a tiered kind of approach, right? So 5 years ago, we had the cloud providers. So the only cloud consumption we had is for the cloud providers themselves. And now we start to pay for solutions that are consuming cloud providers, and they start to be another problem. And we also start to see that we pay for solutions that consuming solutions that are starting that problem. So I think one very hot example is going to be with generative AI, right? So we're utilizing OpenAI to use cloud resources, and then we're paying for GitHub Autopilot that is consuming OpenAI, that's consuming cloud resources. So the problem is not getting any simpler; it's just getting more and more and more abstract with more and more layers. So we have now more possibilities to induct cloud expense, but in indirect manner. So like the more vendors that we're using, everything is translated to the cloud. Like there's an infrastructure behind everything, right? So we just we're hiding cloud charges and use a specific managed service that is not even part of the cloud provider themselves. So like the more vendors that we have and that migration towards use-based pricing and migration towards OpEx is really fundamentally changing the way that we're inducting, and it's just start to get more and more and more complicated. So Lambda is more complicated than running this stuff, and Snowflake is more complicated than running it, just the storage and stuff, and it's continue to get more and more complicated this time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about your time at Logs.io, which is, it's a logging provider. You're built on top of these clouds, but you're really providing like a fundamental sort of infrastructure component. And I'm sure your infrastructure costs were a big part of that, right? Because you're providing so much storage and query on top of that. I guess like in your role there, how familiar were you and how concerned were you specifically with maintaining costs, or was that like I guess like how deep into the engineering team did that get? Is that something you were always focused on, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so in Logs.io, I ended up as an engineering director, managing the entire infrastructure side. So it was both the pure DevOps kind of traditional role, but also the teams that are responsible for the ingestion pipelines and like making sure that Logs.io works at scale. And like in Logs.io, I was in charge. I was getting yelled at when a system failed, but I was also getting yelled at when the system cost too much money. And this is oftentimes, very contradicting kind of set of rules, because when the system failed, you're increasing the auto-scaling group, just spinning up a bunch more services just to quiet down everything and to make sure that everything's operate. And then the next week is going to be, all right, so why did the AWS charge grow by 5%? And don't you remember the production incidents for last week? We discussed it. We want to add more resources. And no, drop it all. So it was very hard to find that balance, and with when time goes by and we start to get more and more distributed with our operation, everything starts to get exponentially harder. So we used more AWS services on more regions, migrated some of the workload to Azure, then purchased MailChimp and Twilio and Akamai and a bunch of security products. And now I have 50 different user-based price software, all part of my production environment. And finance calls me. It's hey, Roi, by the way, what's the price for that customer? As seriously, I mean, I have no idea on how to even tackle that. I have 50 different services. I can't isolate a specific tenant out of that. But even a lot more simple questions like AWS bill grew by 5%. Is this good or not? Yeah. And it might be good because our revenue grew by 10% and our AWS bill only grew by 5%. So thumbs up. But it's probably going to be a combination of revenue growth and our ability to support more resources using that. But also we messed up somehow, probably. Yeah. 100%. And finding that right balance between, all costs are always growing, but what's growing unproportionally to what it should have. So that's it's a difficult problem that, we faced on a daily basis. We're getting reports from the cost management solution we use. So right, the AWS bill is that number. Is that the right one? And we need to start, to track back, look at 200 different managed services on 8 regions on AWS and see what's growing non-proportionally to our revenue. Yeah. And good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have, I don't know, either stories you have or common issues you see where of cost explosions or areas where people are sort of making the wrong mistake or making the wrong choice that's costing them more without just because maybe an education problem or awareness problem around that?
So AWS is notoriously hard with really understanding the cost model of specific services. So internet gateway is always the one that spins up it in mind. and S3, infrequent access.
Yeah.
So there's like a small letters that you have to keep each object there for 30 days, and people like really don't even think about it. So they say, all right, I'm putting something on that infrequent access. I'm not going to read it. I know that I'm not going to read it, so I'm okay with infrequent access, but I'm deleting it in less than 30 days. So it starts to see like we have multiple stories of that, that you wake up one day to feel like the AWS bill is like 20% higher than what it should have. And they're like, wait, but it's a feature that was supposed to like save money. We turned on this flag. It's just literally one click in the UI, and hundreds of thousands of dollars go by. Or CloudWatch usage when you don't even understand, or utilizing lab the metrics when you don't need to. So there's a bunch of common pitfalls that customers are using. But it can maybe like significantly more simple. Like 40% of the instances are over provisioned, meaning that you're one tier higher in the instance type than you should. So this means you're just paying double for 40% of your infrastructure. It's insane. And not even talking about idle stuff and technology refresh. AWS just released GP3 instead of GP2. There's literally no reason not to use it. And people are like, delaying that migration is we need to just change. It's going to save you so much money. So there's a lot of these, and it's a constant battle because it keeps on happening, right? So there's more new stuff that they're releasing at AWS. They have more and more complicated pricing. Companies are using more services, and it's harder and harder.
Yep. So are there I don't want to say a bunch, but is there a fair number of changes that when people sign up for Finout, they can get in there, and right away you have like changes they can make that almost don't even require coding changes or anything, like maybe a little bit in your infrastructure as code or something like that, but basically a click button type of situation, and they can save some of these easy ones like the dis type and things like that.
Yeah, so we have a product suite called CostGuard, and CostGuard is the ability for us to scan the environment and find the low-hanging fruits. So because we're looking at both cost usage and telemetry data, we can start to figure out which instances are over provisioned, which services are unused and are idle, just need to be like the recommendations just shut this down. Which technology refresh you do, which commitments you should buy for specific specific instance type. So maybe we can just by committing to a year, it's gonna save you so much money that it's not even worth the risk. Or when it comes to more auxiliary services like Elastic Cache, have like its own pitfalls. So the more services you're using, the more potential savings that you have on common pitfalls that you can run, that you can constantly scan. And it's not a one-time thing. Like it keeps on happening. Like DevOps continue to operate their environment, they can continue to make mistakes. Developers can continue to make mistakes and like over provision stuff. So it's a constant battle. And as I mentioned before, Kubernetes is also huge stuff. So more and more companies starts to rely a majority of their environment on Kubernetes, and then right sizing again shifted one level up than its original problem. So it's okay to have the cluster over provision because we need to to have space to spin up more pods when we need to. But are the pods requesting the right proper amount of resources? Because when developer are spinning up a new service, it's really rare that they're running benchmarks to understand what's the actual consumption requirements of their service. And that's I don't know. Let's go with 16 gigs of RAM and 5 cores. So I will always be like, and it's entire it's one host per pod. Like it's insane. So Finout can help.
And it never gets changed. Like no one looks at it for a long time. Yeah. Is that easy to look at after it's been running a month or two or things like that, and get a sense of like, hey, this is what the actual usage is for a pod, and right size that, or is that still pretty difficult?
Yeah, so if you have the proper tool, so the stuff with Finout, you can run that. So we can track again, we were tracking the metrics throughout the history. Is all right, so this pod never used more than this amount of memory, but it's often is like the P90 of that pod is like running on that kind of, this is the line for memory consumption, is the line for CPU consumption. Just change your YAML in Kubernetes, and you can save. You can actually give the dollar sign. So it's thousands of dollars every month just by changing these two lines in your Kubernetes YAML. It's literally zero reason not to do that, and zero risk because you never use more than 2 gigs of memory. There's literally no reason to ask 5. You're never getting to it. So running those continuous operations with Kubernetes can save so much money. Once you start to optimize your pods, you can later go ahead and optimize your instances for the Kubernetes cluster. So now that we reduced everything, we need less Kubernetes resources, so we can either with our cluster autoscaler just spin up less, or we can right size to pick a different kind of Kubernetes instance family, because maybe we need more RAM, maybe we need more CPU, per our efficiency. So we have more ability to do that.
Yeah, I love that the most about some of these like automated maintenance tools of just like how many times have you set something up at the beginning, guessed at the metrics and things like that, and roll it out, and then it just falls off your radar to go back and check because you're moving on to the next service and stuff. But if you just have something to say like, look, you're twice as much memory as you need, twice as much CPU as you need, just change those real quick. It's going to take you 10 minutes, and then you're out of there. Like just to like keep you on top of that stuff and as a reminder, and it can really save some serious money there. You mentioned reserved instances. What are your thoughts on reserved instances? Do you recommend people use reserved instances? Have you seen some bad situations there? Like any best practices around that?
So I think there's really no reason not to do that. Like people are always afraid of committing. So now I'm going to take the decision in next quarter, next month, but it really doesn't matter, right? So you're not going to leave AWS within that year, right? So I can guarantee it. You're not going to leave AWS within 3 years as well. So you just rather off commit. So don't commit to the most strict part of Roi. So you have convertible Rois, so you can always change them. So just pick an instance type, buy as many Rois as you need, and worst case convert it if you're running to different types. So you get less savings, but you still be able to it's significantly higher than zero. And same with AWS has the RI marketplace, right? So it's worst case you can just set it. So AWS is like a very vibrant marketplace. You will find someone willing to sell to buy your unused RI. So and as long as you have a tool that constantly shows you like what's your utilization, what's your status, there's really no reason not to do that. And like the higher you commit for longer periods of time, like the more discount you get from AWS, always pending your specific payment terms, if it's upfront, partial upfront, or no upfront. So the more money you give to AWS for as many years as possible, obviously you're going to get the higher levels of discount. So it really depends on how sure of you. So it also can be like different parts of the application. You have like different certainty on it, right? So if you have a specific database that is core to your business, it's running for years, really no reason not to commit for 3 years up front, right? So it's just there. You can take the risk, but it's just worth the extra money that you can save. For the more fluctuative part, don't commit to everything. Run some of it on spots. Commit to some in saving plans, which is a bit more fluid in terms of what you can do. So really depends.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I always like to close with just like a little bit of future forward-looking stuff, what you're excited about. One thing, you know a lot about Kubernetes and especially like in the cost game, all that stuff. You mentioned how Kubernetes is great at a lot of things. It's also very complex. Where do you see it sort of like, do you think it will continue to just gain more and more market share over the next 5-10 years or so? Or do you think we'll see different solutions sort of pop up and take some of that away?
I really don't see another alternative at this point. When Kubernetes started, there was a kind of a war, right? So Kubernetes or Mesosphere or Docker Swarm, Nomad. But I think you won't find anyone who will say that Kubernetes did not win. Like we're flying to Amsterdam for KubeCon, which is a sold out in-person event, 10,000 people a month, a month before. It's insane. Kubernetes is the industry standard. I think this is here to stay. Kubernetes would just get smarter and easier to manage and like bake more stuff within it. And I think the cloud providers are also investing more in Kubernetes adoption. And we started to see like people calling it the modern cloud operating system. And it really is, right? So I can just install Kubernetes and I don't need to think about everything else. So like Finout is a 100% Kubernetes organization, by the way. So we built our entire infrastructure on Kubernetes. This gives us the ability, we can migrate between clouds based on, tomorrow we can operate Finout in our remote regions. We can do whatever we want because we're running 100% on Kubernetes. We don't even need to think about it. We don't need to batch servers. We don't need to do anything. Everything continue to change beneath the feet. If there's a CV in one of the instances, it just spin up automatically a new one with batch spread severity. The pod is migrated and we're done. Like we don't even need to think about it. So it gives us so much more flexibility in terms of managing our environment that see a way back. I think it's going to get more and more advanced, and we're going to see a lot more innovation, around that. But Kubernetes is here to stay.
Yeah. On that same note, you say you could switch cloud providers, all that stuff. Do you currently run in multiple cloud providers, or do you run all your actual sort of infrastructure on one cloud provider?
So running most of the workload on AWS, we're a relatively young company. We do utilize other cloud vendors for their specific set of abilities. So, Google BigQuery is amazing, and they have the ability to run, machine learning models and use those kinds of stuff, which is better than what we can get on AWS. So running specific portion of Finout in Google GCP because, why not? We can utilize it, and we don't really... I think younger companies are not really relate to one specific cloud vendor. You can just pick and choose between the right ones, and as long as we are able to centralize, manage everything, which Terraform is amazing at, and I know we can manage the cost centralized, which Finout is amazing at. Like we can continue to really not care where we're running our service, as long as we're getting like the best service and the best price, and really just innovate. This is what important.
Nice. And is that on EKS on AWS?
Yep.
And what have you been pretty happy with that? What's that experience been like?
So, EKS is significantly better than what it was at launch. I remember, attending the reInvent when the launch EKS, and everyone really? Like, this is what you worked on for the past 3 years? Like, this is your answer. And it took a bit of time, but now EKS is a lot significantly better. It's still not perfect. I think Google is more advanced with GKE, but EKS is getting to be really a commodity service. You don't even think about it, just launch clusters. It's still more complicated than what it should have been. It's still you can blame AWS with many things, but eventually the technology works. It's enabling Kubernetes to the masses. I remember at Logs.io when you started to adopt Kubernetes, no one even thought about managing Kubernetes for the cloud provider. We needed to install Kubernetes. It took us months to create automated installation to make sure we have all the OPEC rules and Terraform for everything. It was a nightmare. Yeah. And now you just click cluster. So I think it's significantly better and just getting better and better with that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, any we talked about future of Kubernetes. What about you? Any future tech or anything you're exploring, you're excited about? Anything around there?
Yeah, so I think 2023 is a very interesting year in so many fronts. Yeah. But as a founder that is building cloud cost management company in 2023, we're really excited about what's coming. Like we see the market really evolves in front of our eyes. We see more competitors, we see more innovation, and we're digging it. It's amazing to see what the market is evolving, and FinOps really taking the forefront. When trying to sell FinOps in early 2021, people were talking about who really cares about money? We just need to run fast and bring more customer, right? I don't even need to care about it. I have unlimited check from my CFO. Yeah. And now the entire conversation changed, and I'm really excited to see what's continuing to happen, how we can bring FinOps really to the forefront, and see what organization comes up with and their requirements from a solution like us, and having the opportunity to lead this market, with very innovative solutions, gives us the ability to play around with so many use cases and meet prospect that starts to demand us stuff that we never ever dreamed of. And this is possible. We just let's ship that feature. So, it's super fun time to see that, and I really think that cost management is here to stay for the long run. I mean, we have a scar, living scar as a market, and just not thinking about margins and about the efficiency of the software that we're building is just not something that's going to repeat itself in the at least coming years. Yeah. When the market is going to bounce back, money is going to be free again, everyone will be happy, but that scar is going to maintain. So I really think that, cost management and the entire, philosophy around it is fundamentally changed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was very forward looking of you and the team to be thinking about this 2 years ago when truly everyone was spending like crazy and not thinking about that. So I'm glad it's working out for you and all that. For folks that are listening, have Kubernetes, have high cloud bills and want to know more about Finout, where can they learn more about you, more about Finout and take a look?
So we have Finout.io, a public website, where people can sign up for a free trial. We can set up their accounts. They can onboard themselves and start to really play with the tool. We're here to help and to run processes. We are SOC 2 compliant, so everything that is on the whole InfoSec nightmare is usually being taken care of. And it's really easy to start and work with us and see like what we can offer. And we're happy to just chit chat about cloud cost management in any day, share us with your problems, and maybe we can help.
Yep. Awesome. One thing I've found is like these special vendors like you have so much knowledge. You've seen so many customers about this that even just like a conversation with you as part of, signing up for a subscription, like is just worth its weight in gold because you've seen so much. So I'm telling everyone, take advantage of that. These people that know what they're talking about. So anyway, Roi Ravhon, CEO, co-founder of Finout. Thank you for coming on Software Engineering Daily.
Thank you, Alex, so much. I had a blast.
Awesome.